Is Jesus advocating self-mutilation? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Mark on Walking Through the Bible.
Of his word, the glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, turn to Mark chapter 9. We're going to be reading from verses 42 to 50. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Mark chapter 9, beginning at verse 42. But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung about his neck and he were thrown into the sea. If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. It is better for you to enter into life maimed, rather than having two hands to go into hell, into the fire that shall never be quenched, where their worm dies not, and the fire is not quenched. And if your foot causes you to sin, cut it off. It is better for you to enter into life maimed, rather than having 2 feet to be cast into hell, into the fire that shall never be quenched, where their worm dies not, and the fire is not quenched. And if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. It is better for you to enter into the kingdom of God with 1 eye, rather than having 2 eyes to be cast into hell fire, where their worm dies not, and the fire is not quenched. For everyone will be seasoned with fire, and every sacrifice will be seasoned with salt. Salt is good, but if the salt loses its flavor, how will you season it? Have salt in yourselves and have peace with one another. Starting in verse 33 of the chapter, Jesus begins having a discussion with the disciples about who would be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Jesus' answer was that his followers should seek to become humble servants, not to aspire to make a name for themselves. The way he illustrated this was through the use of a child. Jesus said, "He who receives a child in my name receives me." In other words, he who behaves with humility behaves like Christ and will be accepted like Christ. However, if you don't believe this way and behave this way, you won't be accepted by Christ. Starting at verse 42, Jesus continues by saying that whoever causes one of these little ones, which would represent his disciples, to stumble and fall into sin, it is better for a millstone to be hung around his neck and be cast into the sea, killed. The millstone under consideration here is a very large, heavy stone that would break the neck of anyone if it were tied to it, and then the person thrown into the sea. This is how serious God views those who cause others to sin, and so we should view it as serious too. And just in case we miss the seriousness of Jesus' words here, he goes even further. He said, if your hands, feet, or eyes are going to cause you or someone to stumble into sin, then we are to remove them, for it would be better to enter into eternal life maimed than with a whole body be cast into hell. Is Jesus literally promoting self-mutilation here? No, Jesus is using hyperbole, but he is saying that if someone is causing us or others to stumble into sin, then we're to remove whatever that something is. For instance, the Bible teaches in places like 1 Peter 4 verse 3 that Christians are not to use alcohol as a beverage. We can use it for a medicine or other purposes, but not to ingest socially. Now that doesn't mean that we can't be in the same room as those who drink, but we need to be careful if we are, that our influence isn't being affected. But for those Christians who have a problem with alcohol, they might choose not to even be near the stuff so that they won't be tempted to sin. They might even cut out proper uses of alcohol in order not to stumble into sin. The same thing could be said of a whole host of other sins too. If we know we have a weakness in some area or another, we need to do as much as we can to cut out situations where we know we'll be tempted to commit that sin. The reason? Because sin will separate us from God, and if we choose to habitually live in sin and we die in that condition, we will be cast away to hell, where the worm dies not and the fire is not quenched. This phrase is a quotation from Isaiah 66:44. It is repeated 3 times in the New King James Version. However, some of the ancient manuscripts omit the phrase in verse 44 and 46, having it only in verse 48. Whether or not the phrase was added to those first 2 verses in the end makes no difference, for it is found in verse 48, and it does not change Jesus' teachings at all, for Jesus is using those 3 examples to teach the same lesson, which is that hell is a terrible place and it is eternal. I have never been on fire myself, but I have burned myself, and I can assure you I want the pain of the burning to go away or be quenched as soon as possible. Such won't happen in hell, though. It will never go away. Worms, we know, assist in the decaying process of a dead body. They eat at the body until the body is no more. If the person was actually present in the body when this occurred, it would be painful. Even though there's no physical worms in hell, just like there's no physical fire, the picture Jesus is giving here is a decaying process that just won't end. and one in which the person experiencing this will be present. Everyone seasoned with fire of eternal punishment will experience this pain for all of eternity. However, those seasoned with the purifying fire of Christ's words, also here described as salt, will experience joy for all of eternity. Salt is a good preserver, but if it's lost its saltiness, how will you season it? Jesus' point: have salt within yourselves, follow the words of Christ, and be at peace with one another, instead of trying to one-up the other and become the greatest. This should be the attitude of a Christian as well. With that, our time is up for today, Lord willing. We hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Mark chapter 10, verses 1 to 12, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.